The old folks in Willow Creek had a saying, "When the willow weeps, the creek will bleed." It was a phrase that carried the weight of generations, a warning passed down through the ages. No one dared speak it aloud, for fear that the very act of uttering the words might summon the darkness they foretold. Yet every child knew the rhyme, felt its icy grip tighten around their heart whenever the wind rustled through the willow's ancient boughs. It was as if the tree itself was alive, whispering secrets only the innocent could hear, for they knew, as surely as the sun would set, that Willow Creek held secrets, secrets that were buried deep, hidden beneath layers of time and silence. Dark, terrible secrets that whispered on the wind, the kind of secrets that could drive a person mad if they listened too closely. This year the willow wept more than usual. Its branches drooped lower and its leaves, once a vibrant green, were now a sickly yellow. Its leaves clung to the branches like frightened children, refusing to let go even as the wind tried to tear them away. The wind carried their whispers through the town, a constant reminder of the darkness that festered beneath the surface. It was a sound that sent shivers down the spine of anyone who heard it. The townsfolk, hardened by generations of fear, tried to ignore the whispers. They went about their daily lives pretending that everything was normal. But fear has a way of seeping into the cracks of even the bravest heart. It finds the smallest opening and takes root, growing until it consumes everything. And in Willow Creek, fear was a constant companion. It lurked in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. A stranger arrived in Willow Creek on a day when the wind howled like a banshee. He was tall and gaunt, his face hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat. His eyes, when they met yours, were like chips of ice, cold and unforgiving. They seemed to see right through you to the very core of your being. He asked too many questions, questions about the willow, about the town's history, questions that no one dared answer. The townsfolk avoided his gaze, their eyes darting nervously as they mumbled excuses and hurried away. The stranger's arrival coincided with a string of unsettling events. A sudden cold snap descended upon the town, freezing the creek solid. Children began having nightmares, their screams echoing through the empty streets at night. The kind of nightmares that left them trembling and afraid to close their eyes again. And then the livestock started disappearing, leaving behind only a faint metallic scent and an unsettling silence. It was as if the very life was being drained from the town. The whispers on the wind grew louder, more insistent. Something was coming. Something dark and terrible that would change Willow Creek forever. The townsfolk could feel it in their bones, a sense of impending doom that hung over them like a dark cloud. They knew that whatever was coming, it would not be stopped. The whispers on the wind were a warning, a harbinger of the darkness that was about to descend upon Willow Creek, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. Willow Creek was not always shrouded in fear. There was a time, long ago, when laughter echoed through the valley. The willow, then young and vibrant, had been a source of joy, a place for picnics and courtship. But that was before the darkness came to Willow Creek, before the sacrifices began. The town itself was nestled in a valley, surrounded by hills that rose like watchful giants. A winding river, the creek, flowed through its heart, reflecting the sky like a ribbon of shattered glass, or at least it did during the day. At night, the creek turned black as ink, swallowing the moonlight and hiding whatever lurked beneath its surface. Many of the town's buildings were old, their paint peeling, their windows like vacant eyes. The church, its steeple reaching for a heaven that seemed deaf to their pleas, stood at the highest point, a silent sentinel overlooking the town. Its once bright stained glass windows were now dull and lifeless, their colors leached away by time and something more sinister. The townsfolk, too, bore the weight of the town's history. Their faces were etched with worry lines, their eyes reflecting a deep-seated fear. They moved with a weariness that spoke of countless sleepless nights and whispered prayers. They were bound to this place, tethered to it by blood and history, and they knew in their hearts that there was no escaping the shadows that clung to Willow Creek. The unease began subtly. It started with the children, their innocent games taking on a dark and disturbing tone. They drew pictures of monstrous creatures with glowing eyes and whispered about things lurking in the shadows. Then the adults started to feel it too, a prickling at the back of their necks, a sense of being watched. Sleep offered no escape. Nightmares plagued the townsfolk, vivid and terrifying. They dreamt of a swirling vortex of darkness, of cold, grasping hands and eyes that glowed with an unholy light. They woke from these dreams bathed in cold sweat, their hearts pounding a frantic rhythm against their ribs. The line between dreams and reality blurred. The darkness seeped into their waking hours, casting a pall over everything. Conversations, once filled with mundane, everyday matters, now centered around the strange occurrences. Rumors, like wildfire, spread through the town. Each retelling added a new layer of fear, amplifying the sense of dread that permeated the very air they breathed. The old folks, their faces etched with a lifetime of fear, shook their heads and muttered about ancient pacts and forgotten sacrifices. The stranger, his presence now a looming specter, seemed to be at the heart of it all. He moved through the town like a phantom, always watching, always listening. His silence was more unnerving than any words he could have spoken. He was an enigma, his purpose unknown, his motives shrouded in mystery. Yet one thing was clear, his arrival in Willow Creek was no coincidence. The story of the curse was as old as the town itself, woven into the very fabric of its history. It was passed down through generations, whispered in hushed tones, a cautionary tale to keep the children in line and the adults in fear. The elders would gather the young ones around the fire, their voices low and eyes wide with the weight of the tale. It spoke of a time before the town, before the Willow, when the valley was a place of wild, untamed beauty. The land was lush and vibrant, teeming with life and untouched by human hands. A powerful entity, they said, resided in the heart of the valley. It was a being of ancient origins, shrouded in mystery and darkness. It was a creature of immense power, feeding on the life force of the land and its inhabitants. Its presence was felt in the rustling of the leaves, the whisper of the wind, and the shadows that danced in the moonlight. The people, living in fear of its wrath, made a pact. They sought to protect themselves and their loved ones from the entity's insatiable hunger. They offered a sacrifice, a life for the land's continued prosperity. The ritual was solemn and somber, a necessary evil to ensure their survival. And so, the willow was planted, its roots sinking deep into the earth, a living conduit between the world of men and that of the entity. The tree stood as a silent guardian, its branches swaying gently in the breeze. The sacrifices continued year after year. Each generation bore the burden of the pact, the weight of the curse heavy on their shoulders. Each year on the night of the full moon, the willow wept. Its sap, like tears, flowed down its trunk, a reminder of the lives lost to the entity. And each year a life was offered to appease the entity, to keep it at bay. The ritual was a grim reminder of the town's dark secret. But the entity was insatiable, its hunger growing with each passing year. The sacrifices, once a necessary evil, had become a gruesome tradition, a stain on the soul of Willow Creek. The townspeople lived in constant fear, their lives overshadowed by the ever-present threat of the entity. The once vibrant community had become a place of sorrow and despair. But there was more to the story. Hidden within the whispers and shadows was a glimmer of hope. A prophecy, whispered in hushed tones, spoke of a way to break the curse. It was said that a time would come when the cycle of sacrifice could be ended. It spoke of a time when a stranger would come to Willow Creek, a harbinger of change. This stranger, marked by destiny, would hold the key to ending the cycle of sacrifice and freeing the town from the entity's grasp. The townspeople clung to this hope, their hearts yearning for the day when the curse would be lifted. They awaited the arrival of the stranger, the one who would bring an end to their suffering and restore peace to Willow Creek. The stranger, to the surprise of the fearful townsfolk, did not shy away from the whispers of the curse. He walked with a purpose, his steps echoing through the foggy streets of the old town, as if he was drawn by an unseen force. He listened intently, his ice-blue eyes boring into the soul of the speaker, absorbing every detail, every nuance of the stories told. He sought out the oldest residents, those whose memories stretched back generations, piecing together the fragmented history of Willow Creek. Each story, each memory was a piece of the puzzle he was determined to solve. His investigation led him to the town archives, a dusty repository of forgotten lore and yellowed documents. The air was thick with the scent of aged paper and ink, a testament to the passage of time. He spent days poring over ancient tomes, his brow furrowed in concentration. Each page he turned revealed more about the dark history of the town and the malevolent force that plagued it. The townsfolk watched him from a distance, their fear mixed with a flicker of hope. They had seen many come and go, but there was something different about this stranger. Could this stranger, this outsider, be the one to break the curse that had haunted them for generations? Their hearts dared to hope, even as their minds remained cautious. The stranger emerged from the archives with a grim expression. He had uncovered the truth, a truth that was both terrifying and enlightening. He had found what he was looking for, a detailed account of the pact, the sacrifices, and the entity. The writings were clear, leaving no room for doubt about the dark history that had been hidden for so long. He had also found something else, something that sent a chill down his spine. The entity's power was growing, and it was feeding on the fear that permeated Willow Creek. The entity wasn't just content with consuming lives, it thrived on the terror it instilled, growing stronger with each passing day. It was growing stronger, feeding on the fear that permeated Willow Creek. The townsfolk's dread was like a feast for the malevolent force. The stranger knew what he had to do. He had to confront the entity, to face the darkness head-on, and to break the cycle of fear and sacrifice. He gathered the townsfolk, their faces etched with a mixture of fear and anticipation. They listened with bated breath, hanging on his every word. He told them everything he had learned, revealing the true nature of the entity and the price they had paid for their ancestors' pact. The weight of his words settled heavily upon them, but there was also a glimmer of hope. He spoke of the prophecy, of the stranger who would come to break the curse. The ancient manuscript detailed a savior who would rise against the darkness. And then, he looked each and every one of them in the eye and said, "I believe I am that stranger." His voice was steady, filled with conviction, and for the first time in a long while, the townsfolk felt a spark of true hope. The stranger's plan was dangerous, a desperate gamble against an ancient evil. He proposed a counter-ritual, a way to sever the link between the Willow and the entity. But it would come at a cost. The ritual demanded a sacrifice, not of life, but of something equally precious: their fear. The townsfolk were hesitant. Fear was ingrained in them, woven into the very fabric of their being. Could they truly cast it aside even if it meant their salvation? The stranger, sensing their doubt, spoke of the sacrifices already made, the lives lost, the futures stolen. He reminded them that fear was a prison, one that the entity used to keep them trapped. One by one the townsfolk stepped forward. They spoke of their fears, their voices trembling at first, then growing stronger with each shared terror. They spoke of their loved ones lost, of the darkness that haunted their dreams, of the suffocating grip of the curse that had held them captive for generations. And as they spoke, a strange thing happened. Their fear, instead of consuming them, began to dissipate, replaced by a glimmer of hope.